It's amazing how quickly things change, isn't it? One minute you're catching up on the news, and the next it feels like a whole new world out there.
It really does. It's hard to keep up sometimes, especially with everything happening so fast.
Exactly. And that's why we're here today on April 2nd, 2025. We're going to take a deep dive into some of the big stories from yesterday, April 1st.
It's like hitting the pause button for a minute and really dissecting what's going on.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about separate events here. We're going to connect the dots between the stock market, the auto industry, a pretty dramatic scene in the Senate, and a big election result in Wisconsin.
At first glance, they might seem totally unrelated, but we're going to see if we can find the common threads and understand what it all means.
Because let's face it, sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees when you're just skimming headlines, right?
Absolutely. We want to get beyond the surface, figure out what's really driving these events, and what we can expect moving forward.
So let's start with the financial world. What happened in the stock market yesterday? It seemed like a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a clear-cut day. I mean, we saw some gains, but not across the board. It's interesting because the first quarter of this year was already pretty rough, the worst for the market since 2022, actually.
So not the most stable starting point.
Right. And then you throw in this anticipation of President Trump's tariff announcement scheduled for today, April 2nd, which he's calling Liberation Day, and you've got a recipe for some market jitters.
Liberation Day, huh? That's a pretty loaded term.
It is, and I think it reflects the kind of sweeping approach he seems to be taking with these tariffs. We're not just talking about a few targeted industries here.
So what's the scope then? What are we looking at?
Well, indications are that he's aiming for all trading partners, and that covers some major sectors like the automotive industry, pharmaceuticals, even steel.
Wow, that's pretty broad. I can see why investors might be a bit on edge. So what's at the heart of this unease? What are the big concerns driving these market fluctuations?
I'd say the main worries are twofold. On the one hand, you've got the potential for increased inflation, which is already a global concern, and then there's the risk of slower economic growth worldwide, as these tariffs could really shake up established trade relationships.
So, yesterday's market performance was basically a reflection of investors trying to figure out how all this might play out, waiting to see the specifics and how the pieces fall.
Exactly. I mean, uncertainty is never good for the markets, and with so much up in the air right now, experts are predicting continued volatility until things become a bit clearer.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to an industry that's directly impacted by these potential tariffs. For the auto industry, seems like we're already seeing some interesting reactions there.
We are. It's actually quite fascinating. Even before these tariffs are set to take effect on April 3rd, we saw some big sales jumps in the first quarter. General Motors, for example, saw a huge increase, something like 16.7%.
Wow, that's a pretty significant spike. What's driving that? Are people just trying to beat the price hikes?
Well, that's the prevailing theory. With the possibility of a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and parts, it looks a lot like panic buying.
But couldn't it also be about more than just price? I mean, could this rush to buy also reflect concerns about future availability of certain cars or features, with potential supply chain disruptions and all that?
That's a really good point. It's not just about the immediate cost. It's about potentially not being able to get the car you want at all if things get disrupted.
Exactly. People might be thinking, better to get it now before it's gone or completely unaffordable. And speaking of unaffordable, a 25% tariff, that's going to add up to a pretty hefty price increase for consumers.
It does. Estimates suggest the increase could range from $5,000 to $15,000 per vehicle, particularly for cars that rely heavily on imported parts or are fully manufactured overseas.
Yikes, that's not insignificant. It makes perfect sense why people would rush to buy now if they were already in the market for a new car.
And car companies are taking notice too. Hyundai, for instance, has already warned its dealerships about these potential price hikes, and they're figuring out how to adjust their pricing strategies.
So it sounds like while March might have been a good month for auto sales, the long-term outlook is a bit more uncertain.
Yeah, analysts are predicting a slowdown later this year. Higher prices and potential inventory issues as manufacturers adapt to these new tariffs are likely to put a damper on consumer demand. So it could be a case of a short-term boost followed by a more challenging period.
It's fascinating to see how these economic anxieties are playing out in real time, and it seems like this period of uncertainty is also spilling over into the political arena, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just look at Senator Cory Booker's extended speech in the Senate yesterday. Talk about a dramatic scene.
That was something else. He really made a statement.
He did. It was quite a feat. He started speaking on Monday evening, April 1st, and didn't stop until Tuesday evening, talking for over 24 hours straight.
Wait, 24 hours? Didn't he break a record or something?
He did. 25 hours and 4 minutes to be exact. He beat the previous record set by Senator Strom Thurmond way back in 1957.
Wow, that's incredible. What was the motivation behind such a marathon speech?
Well, he described it as a protest against what he called a national crisis created by President Trump and Elon Musk. And he didn't mince words, saying that the situation was not left or right, it's right or wrong.
So it sounds like he saw this as a moral imperative, and I imagine he covered a lot of ground in 25 hours.
He did. He touched on a wide range of issues, from the war in Ukraine and USAID's relief efforts to potential cuts to Medicaid and Social Security, and even the whole Signal app controversy with the Trump administration.
So he really used this as a platform to voice a lot of concerns. I heard Senator Schumer even interrupted to acknowledge the record-breaking moment.
He did. There was a moment of applause in the chamber, recognizing both the physical endurance and the symbolic significance of the protest.
Pretty powerful stuff. Okay, so our final stop for today takes us to Wisconsin for the state Supreme Court election. This race seemed to grab a lot of national attention, and the results look pretty significant.
They do. It's projected that the liberal-leaning candidate, Dane County Circuit Court Judge Susan Crawford, has won the election.
And her opponent, Brad Schimmel, he was the conservative candidate backed by President Trump, right?
Yeah, that's right. He had Trump's endorsement. So this victory for Crawford is seen as pretty crucial because it's expected to maintain the progressive majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
And why is that majority so important? What's at stake here?
Well, the court is expected to rule on some pretty major issues soon. Things like congressional redistricting, voting rights, labor rights, even abortion access. So the makeup of the court has a huge impact on these decisions.
It sounds like a race with huge implications, which might explain why it drew so much attention and money from outside Wisconsin.
It was actually the most expensive judicial election in U.S. history.
Yeah.
A ton of money poured in from various groups and high-profile individuals.
I think I heard that even Elon Musk and George Soros were involved, weren't they?
They were. Musk, who's been a big political donor and advisor to President Trump, reportedly put about $20 million into the race through different groups to support Schimmel. And then you had Soros on the other side backing Crawford with a significant investment as well.
So it really became a kind of national proxy battle. And Schimmel has already conceded, right?
He has. Shortly after the projections came out, he admitted that the numbers weren't going his way and even said something like, "This wasn't our day."
Which, considering he had the backing of a former president and someone as influential as Elon Musk,
Right.
is being interpreted by some as a sign of the current political climate, right?
Absolutely. A lot of people are seeing this as a potential indicator of public opinion regarding Trump and Musk and their influence.
Wow, it's incredible how much can happen in just 24 hours. So let's recap. Yesterday, April 1st, we saw a mixed bag in the stock market with investors bracing for new tariffs. We had this surge in auto sales, likely fueled by those same tariffs. And then in the political arena, we had a historic protest in the Senate and a potentially significant shift in the balance of power on the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
It's amazing, isn't it? 4 separate events, but they all paint a picture of a very dynamic economic and political landscape. We see economic anxieties playing out in the markets and consumer behavior, and we see the political scene continuing to be this battleground of ideas and closely watched elections.
And it feels like all these things are converging at a crucial moment. So here's something for our listeners to ponder. As we move forward, what do you think will be the biggest turning point in the coming months? What should we be paying attention to?
It's a great question. And I think the key is to not just focus on the immediate effects of these events, but also to consider their long-term consequences. The interplay between economic policies, consumer choices, and the ever-changing political climate will shape the narrative for the rest of the year and beyond.
It's going to be a fascinating ride, that's for sure. And we encourage everyone to keep following these developments and to think about how these trends might continue to evolve. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.